Jim Shave Head in the chat and see if we can get Jim to shave his head and join the party. So there you go. All I needed to see is a few of those. It looks like it's decided, Jimmy. We'll get some clippers, and maybe before you're up here next, we'll get you looking smooth like Darren and I. I'm gonna share just some information really about blockchain, about the opportunity that lays ahead of us. And I want to share, before I get into my slideshow, a little bit about how I ended up here. Traditional entrepreneur, as Jim said, not really tech savvy. And so I read a CNET blog sent me an email about the Bitcoin white paper in 2010. I wish I was tech savvy because I would have probably mined Bitcoin or started figuring out ways to buy Bitcoin. But instead of that, I just thought, what a cool concept. I liked the idea behind the concept of Bitcoin. 2013, a friend of mine was gambling online in the United States, which the banks wouldn't allow you to really transfer funds to and from your bank account if you were using online casinos. So I said, well, why are you gambling online if you can't get your money out? And he goes, well, I'm not using like regular money. I'm using Bitcoin. And I just was like, really? I was like, I read about that a few years ago. And so some of our companies at that time in 2013 started buying Bitcoin. And I'd heard a little bit about blockchain technology, not a lot. Built other businesses, traditional businesses. We had an Inc. 500 company called MyTown2Go. MyTown, the number 2 Go. It was an Inc. 500 in 2020, so you can Google that if you want to or whatnot. We were doing restaurant delivery like a Uber Eats or a DoorDash. We ended up merging with Delivery.com. And so it was a great business. Built some other companies, credit card processing firm. And then in 2017, a friend of mine reached out and started doing trading software in the cryptocurrency space. And so I got involved with him, and it went really well. Our trading software was doing really well, just trading different cryptocurrencies. And there were a few friends of ours that worked in that space that were on the blockchain side. And I remember one of my friends, Craig, was like, Tony, crypto's great, but blockchain is going to change the world. Blockchain's what's really important. And I said, Craig, I don't care why our software is making people a bunch of money. I care that our software is making people a bunch of money. I don't need to understand the technology. As far as I knew, blockchain and cryptocurrency were the same thing. Now, as I've kind of learned over the years, that's like saying email and the internet are the exact same thing. Certainly, you use the internet to send email out, but you can do a heck of a lot more than send emails using the internet. Obviously, you guys are all here as living proof. We can use the internet to do a lot more than just send an email. And we appreciate you using the internet to share some of your time with us, to learn a little bit more about what we're working on. And for those of you that are brand new, I want to share with you how you could position yourself to benefit financially from blockchain and the Web 3.0 shift that's getting ready to happen. And I remember 2018, my friend that started the trading software company reached out to me and he said, hey, you need to buy nodes from this blockchain project called Gala Games. And I remember I said, what the heck is a node? I don't know what that is. And he explained it real quick. He was like, it's software. You put it on your computer and this company is paying you to borrow your computer power. So you look at like Airbnb, people pay you to borrow your house and stay there for a little while. Uber, if you're driving people, they're kind of paying you to borrow your use of your car. He said blockchain companies borrow your computer power and they'll pay you. And I just remember, I said, well, how much do they pay you? I'm interested in that. And he said, well, they give you Gala tokens. And this was 2018. I said, well, how much is a Gala token worth? And he said, well, right now, nothing. And I just remember I said, well, this sounds amazing. You're gonna borrow my computer, and then you're gonna pay me with magic internet money that doesn't have any value. I said, it sounds amazing for Gala Games, not so amazing for me. And he said, well, Tony, he goes, it doesn't have any value today. But over time, if people start playing these games, it could be extremely valuable. It's a long story. I needed to call him back to redo a transaction, basically to buy these nodes. I was going to buy $10,000 worth of nodes. And at that time, we were kind of merging our delivery business with Delivery.com, and I just forgot to call him. And so I didn't think much of it. I'm not a gamer. I never even thought about it. about 2 years went by. It gets into like November of 2021, and he starts posting about this Gala Games project. And I just remember I saw it and I was like, uh-oh, it hit me. I forgot to call my friend back. And so I called him and he's like, dude, we need to get on a Zoom. So I get on a Zoom presentation and he's like, bro, there's millions of people playing these games. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, the nodes generate tokens. They pay you with these tokens. And it's been a lot of tokens for me. He goes, I've been selling them over the last few months. And I said, how much have you sold? And he said, a little over $40 million worth. And I was like, no way. And then he showed me some of his Binance accounts and stuff like that. And I was like, holy cow, you've sold over $40 million. And our other buddy, Wright, I was like, how much has he got? And he goes, a little over $4.3 billion worth. And I was like, and then I asked him what you should never ask if you're at the right place at the right time, but you don't take action, you don't realize it maybe. I said, if I would have called you back, how many tokens would I have right now if I'd have bought those nodes? And he starts doing the math. He's like, if you sold all of your tokens today, right now, it would be a little over $11 million. And it was crazy. I remember going to CoinMarketCap. They had like a $4 billion day in trading volume. I could have sold $11 million probably within seconds. And what's probably even worse for me, if I would have called him back 5 years ago, it was over 5 years ago now, today, while we're having this Impact Summit, if I would have called him back and had those nodes right now, it would generate $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month in tokens. And so I chalk that up as a missed opportunity. I think probably all of us in our lives have missed opportunities. Type in the chat, missed, if you've ever missed an opportunity. I wish I would have bought Bitcoin in 2010 when I first heard about it. I wish I would have bought Tesla stock when Elon Musk got going and you started to hear about him. I have had so many opportunities that I've been at the right place at the right time, but didn't realize it. Now, about 2 more years go by. We're in October of 23, and my friend Wright reached out to me, the one that had helped start the Gala project, and he said, listen, we want you to help us drive revenue through our blockchain projects. And I remember we were busy. We had just gotten over 1,000 employees and contractors in our accounting firm. We had just, I think, hit at that time just over 10 billion in tax credits filed for our clients. And so I was like, listen, I'm really busy, but I had watched what they had done in the past, and I wanted to see what they were doing towards the future. And so I remember going out to Las Vegas, and they shared with me their vision. And at that point, I remember they were talking about blockchain, Web3, and they started to educate me on really what blockchain is. And I started to dig in for the next 2-3 months. I read everything, watched every TED Talk. I called my friend that I'd made fun of, Craig, where I was like, I don't care about blockchain. All those years ago, I was like, Craig, you remember how I made fun of you trying to explain blockchain to me? He was like, yeah. I was like, can you explain blockchain to me, please? And he was like, okay, I'll explain blockchain to you. And so I want to go through, for those of you that are brand new, and I saw in the chat earlier, there's some brand new folks. I want to go through, if you're new to blockchain, or even if you're an owner, but you're new to blockchain, just an idea of what blockchain is and how it's going to affect the economy around the world, governments around the world, and our interactions around the world. If you look at society as a whole, there's been a few breakthroughs that I would say have closed gaps between kind of the haves and the have-nots, so to speak, that have shifted society forward and literally helped us leap into the next generation and the next generation. And I think one of the first gaps I could look back to is what I would call the knowledge gap. And if you think of the knowledge gap, back in about 1440, the mid 1400s, a gentleman Gutenberg created the printing press. And prior to that happening, if you weren't royalty, if you weren't nobility, you weren't reading books. You didn't have access to knowledge, to books. And the printing press changed all of that. And it led to the Renaissance. Like all of a sudden, more people had access to knowledge, and the world shifted forward as society and technologically. If you go into like the 1860s, you'd have the combustion engine, which I would say that closed the power gap. Out of Austria, Germany, they created the combustion engine. A few different inventors are kind of credited with making it and kind of advancing it. But prior to that happening, if you didn't have oxen or horses or mules, you weren't developing land hardly at all. And then here comes this breakthrough that closes that power gap. And now a lot of us in our garages have more horsepower than the kings and queens of the 1800s, for sure. It closed that gap. I look at the internet as closing what I would call the distance gap. This is really good proof of closing the distance gap. Seeing people in Australia, people in Spain, I saw people in Italy, obviously people all around the United States. I see people from all over the place. And it's because the internet has allowed us to share information real time around the world without having to wait on a third party. We're all here interacting real time. It's amazing. That closed the distance gap. The world is a much smaller place thanks to the technology of the internet. If you look at what blockchain does, it closes what I would call the trust gap. How it does it, I'll go in depth real quickly, but what blockchain allows you to do, if the internet allows us to share information real time, blockchain allows us to share value real time. And that could be in the form of currency. I've had Bitcoin transactions of over $1 million in Bitcoin that took 5 minutes to transact and cost me around $2.47 in transaction fees. I've had bank wires that have taken 5 days before they hit an international bank account, cost me $60 for an international wire. I've had it charge the person I sent like they had an incoming international wire fee of like $30 just to send money. And you have to have third parties involved. I had my bank at that time, Wells Fargo. They had their bank in China, and it's like, all right, here we're sending money. You know, here my bank's going to get with your bank. It's not even me sending them money. It's my bank sending their bank money, and then their bank crediting it to his account or her account, and my bank pulling it out of my account. It's these third parties. And blockchain removes the need for those third parties. How it does it is through decentralization. Jim talked about it. Darren has talked about it a lot. Scott and Waters have talked about it. Everybody that's been on has talked about centralized and decentralized. How it works if you're new to blockchain, though, I just want to give you kind of a simplified idea of why blockchain creates trust. When you have centralized power, centralized authority, that means one person has access to all the information and only one person has access to that information. And if you have that, you have to trust that person. That's why we don't usually trust that person. Think of like banks. We don't even trust banks to be that third party. Every bank you walk into, anywhere in the world, they have SWIFT audits if they're international. Here in the United States, they have state audits. They have federal audits. They have people basically going through and third parties combing through their books to make sure that some banker didn't add another zero in front of the comma and turn a $100,000 transfer into $1 million transfer or bigger. They have people. Now, every now and again, things slip by. If you're ever bored, you can Google about Wells Fargo creating bank accounts without permission. You can Google that. They got fined. It was like $3 billion because they were bonusing their private bankers. Any of their bankers that were working with people, if they opened more accounts, they'd get a bonus. And so somebody like me would go in and open a bank account, then I'd leave, and then they'd open a savings account for me and maybe a business checking account for me that I didn't even know existed. And they would get their bonuses. And it happened for like a year or so. And then finally somebody was like, found one of their extra accounts, maybe the teller, tipped them off, and they were like, what's going on here? They made some phone calls. They started to dig in, and they had done this to tons of people. But it was they could do it because of centralized authority. They were the only ones that knew what was happening. See, blockchain prevents that. I'll give you a quick example. I'm going to think of a number. This is centralized power here, which is good for me. I'm going to think of a number between 1 and 1 million. And I'm going to give each person in the chat one guess. And if anyone in that chat guesses the proper number, anyone guesses the proper number, I'm going to give everyone that's on this live stream 1 Bitcoin. So I'll have to figure out how many people are on here. I'll give each person 1 Bitcoin. Yeah, you can start firing in numbers. Any number between 1 and you only get one shot, only one chance. Now, here's the problem as you're typing in those numbers. I'm not going to tell anyone what the number is. I'm not going to write it down. I'm just going to keep it in my head. And you'll have to use the honor system of whether you guess it or not. And surprisingly, so far, no one's guessed it. I know no one's guessed it because I'm going to make sure no one guesses it because I don't want to give everybody 1 Bitcoin. That's centralized power. That's centralized control. Now, let me tell you how a blockchain, so you can stop guessing now because you're not going to get it right. Even if it, let's say somebody, I just saw, let's see, we've got, Kenny said 67, 67. So anyone with kids knows what that is. No one else does. I only know what that is because I play pickleball and the score 6-7 comes up all the time. And kids will ride by on the golf carts in Puerto Rico and be like 6-7. So let's say I thought of 6-7 and I see Kenny. What I would probably say is, oh, you're so close, Kenny. It was 68. I would make sure no one had picked 68. Now, I had changed the number. Only God and me would ever know that I changed that number. You guys wouldn't know. It's centralized control. Here's how a blockchain would work. If it was blockchain, let's say my football number from high school, maybe my wife is on here. She would know this. Maybe my mom's on here too. It's 29. Okay? The number's 29. 29. Can somebody type in 29 in the chat? 29. Type in 29 in the chat. Okay, so now we know all of us are nodes on a blockchain network. Everyone in here knows the number's 29. Now, here's how the game would work. I'm going to think of a number between 1 and 1 million. We already know what it is. We're going to create a smart contract. All of the Bitcoin, let's say there's thousands of people on here. I have thousands of Bitcoin that goes into an escrow wallet, and it sits there. And then if anyone guesses the number 29, it starts releasing 1 Bitcoin to each and every one of your wallets. If you all guess different numbers, it would just route all that Bitcoin right back into my wallet. It's out of my control at that point. You don't have to rely on me to have all the information. You all know what the number is. Yeah, this is a hypothetical. I know Gregory's waiting, but it's one of the simplest examples I can give you to understand why decentralization and blockchain can change the world. If you get bored, Google the words blockchain voting patent. Blockchain voting patent. Some of you guys, if you're on the computer, take your phone and do it right now. Take your phone and Google blockchain voting patent. And if you scroll and you find that patent, what you'll see is for over 5 years, the United States Postal Service has owned that patent. See, blockchain technology could end voter fraud overnight, which in the United States would be important, but in countries like Zimbabwe and countries like the Congo and Venezuela and Russia, it could be critical because we know elections are being stolen around the world. Blockchain could end that. You would have no voter ID. You wouldn't need it. You wouldn't have to worry about non-citizens voting in your country, whatever country you live in. Everyone, when they registered to vote, would get a blockchain wallet that only they could log into, probably using biometrics, maybe their fingerprint, their iris, and maybe even a password. Once they're logged in, they could issue their vote. It would be anonymous. Only thing that the government would see is a voter wallet ID voted for this candidate, and it would get added up. It would be real time. You'd see it as it was going on. So I know some of you in the United States, it's funny to me. I don't know how we're so technologically advanced, but when we have like a presidential election, it's almost like Arizona is counting votes like a month and a half later after the election. I'm like, how hard is it to count? Blockchain, it would be real time. Like literally, you wouldn't have to wait. Like the second the polls closed, it would be like, here's the numbers in Arizona. The second the polls closed, here's the numbers in California. Here's the numbers in New York. Like they would have the exact voting numbers real time. Blockchain can solve so many problems around the world. One of the biggest things it's going to do, and Jim's going to demo this for us, it's going to give ownership and control of our data in the AI space. That's massive. Because a lot of us probably, if we think about it, don't necessarily need someone like Sam Altman or Bill Gates or even Elon Musk controlling and owning all of our data. Not ideal, especially if there's an opportunity for us to own and control all of our own data. Now, what kind of opportunity is there from an entrepreneurial standpoint? It's massive. In 2021, the World Economic Forum estimated blockchain could disrupt up to $867 trillion in traditional markets. Type in the word trillion in the chat and try and understand that's not a once in a lifetime shift. That's a one-time shift. Never in history. The internet wasn't that big of a shift in wealth, not even close. We'll probably never see that big of a shift again until we're colonizing other planets. And if some of Earth's economy starts to move to the Mars economy, you may see a bigger shift, but we might not be around for that. Our kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, it may be a long, long $1 trillion. I like that, Adam. So we have the ability. I've heard as recently as like 6 months ago, the estimate was 1.3 quadrillion shift. 1.3 I didn't even know that was a real number. Quadrillion. That, I guess it is what comes after a trillion. And so it's bigger than the internet. I think about the blockchain and compare it to that Web 2.0 shift. I remember, I'm old enough to remember shifting kind of from Web 1, where it was just the military was using the internet, Bill Gates, IBM was using the internet, to all of a sudden Web 2.0. 94, 95, 1996, you had Amazon, you had Google, you had PayPal, you had Hotmail. I remember sending my first Hotmail and going, well, this is better than mailing a letter. I remember paying my first credit card bill online and thinking, I'm never going to mail another check. And so if you remember making the shift from Web 1, where you'd never used the internet before, to all of a sudden Web 2, where you started to use the internet, if you're old enough to remember that shift, type in the word shift in the chat. Type in the word shift if you remember the first time you started to use the internet, the first time you started to stream something on Amazon or Netflix and you didn't have to go to Blockbuster Video to rent the movie that you wanted to watch. If you remember that shift, understand this. My opinion, and a lot of people much more intelligent than me, people like Elon Musk, believe that the shift into Web 3.0 and blockchain will be far larger, far more opportunity than the shift from Web 1 to Web 2. Now, not everybody's big on the cryptocurrency side. You can look at a value investor, somebody like Warren Buffett. He says, it's ingenious. He's talking about blockchain. It's ingenious, and blockchain's important, but Bitcoin has no unique value at all. It doesn't produce anything. You can stare at it all day and no little Bitcoins come out or anything like that. Like, he doesn't like it as an investment. Like, he doesn't like cryptocurrency. He likes blockchain, but he doesn't like crypto. Now, I think he's right with the problem with most cryptocurrencies is their ideas. Their ideas. Here's what we're going to do. Here's our ICO. We're going to buy our coin. We're going to build this. We're going to do that. And then they never do it. They sell their coins. They make a bunch of money. They call it pump and dump. They dump those coins onto the market. And then anyone that bought into their vision, bought into their idea, it never comes to fruition. They didn't even plan on bringing it to fruition. What we've done is the opposite. We build the products and the services first. And then after we've built the products and services, we start to bring people into the marketplace and go, hey, instead of using Zoom, use our link. Instead of paying for your power bill out of the pocket, use Green and get paid to pay your power bill. Instead of not knowing what you're putting in your body, use Grow and get QR codes so you can see what that cow ate, what that chicken ate, where they were raised, what went onto those vegetables, any pesticides, any herbicides. You can learn and see exactly what you're putting in your body. So we're creating real world assets, real world services. And that's something that Warren Buffett talks about as well. He says, invest in companies you believe in. He believes in Dairy Queen. I don't know if you guys know Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. He likes Dairy Queen. He believes in it. He invested in it. And what I love about our projects is we create real world assets, real products, real services where people can see tangible value. And I'm not saying that's better or worse. Bitcoin's not built for some kind of revenue generating asset. It was built as a transactional network. It's not even that really. I don't buy Bitcoin to use it. Our companies didn't buy Bitcoin to use it. We bought it because we felt like it was undervalued and it would go higher and higher in value. Now, I could be wrong. Our companies that have bought Bitcoin, we've never sold. None of our companies have sold any Bitcoin ever. When it hits $1 million a coin, we'll start to sell some of our holdings, some of these companies. I don't know if it'll ever get there. I hope it does. Michael Saylor thinks it should go to like 18 million or whatever. I don't know. It's fully speculative. But when we're talking about real companies that drive revenue through the blockchain, it's not speculative anymore. See, if you've seen some of these projects and they've kind of hit you where you're like, that makes sense. I like that. I want to be a part of that. Then you can become a community member. You can become a node owner. You can purchase NFTs and own tokens. You can do all of those things. You can do one of those things, none of those things, or all of those things. Because we tie into revenue. We create a flywheel that uses blockchain to tie revenue into the value of a token. This flywheel is pretty simple. You have what we call proof of action. That's a lot of people, normal people like us, as entrepreneurs. How do we position ourselves in this $1.3 quadrillion shift? How do each and every one of you position yourselves in the middle of that shift? That's a huge question to answer. One of the best ways to do it is through our ecosystem. This community has been building layer one blockchains for over a decade. A decade. Most blockchain companies, especially ICOs, they're around 2 years, dead. 1 year, dead. They're not with us anymore. These guys, our community's been building for over a decade. There's no one on the planet that is more advanced at building layer one blockchains than our community. And you can be a part of it, guys. Proof of action allows you to bring in customers into our projects and services. Each and every one of us can bring in clients that use our meeting platform, that eat food that they know what's going to their body, that know that they can buy phones or jewelry that's been mined ethically and responsibly. So they're acquiring those customers, you're acquiring those customers, and that's generating revenue. All of that revenue is going in to buy a token out of the open market. So now it's not speculation. Why is this product or this service valuable? Why is this token got value? It's because revenue is going in to buy it. And the more revenue that's generated, our community has proof of action rewards. We take a portion of that revenue and we redirect it back to those of you that brought those customers in the first place. Because if you bring customers and you receive tokens, and those tokens get more and more valuable, and we never have any guarantees. We don't know what they're going to be worth. At the end of the day, I looked at something like Gala at 87 cents or whatever it peaked at. I mean, that's amazing. And I look at some of our tokens at a tenth of a penny, a half a penny, maybe a penny. And I think, man, if it gets up to, 50 cents or something, that'd be amazing. $1 would be crazy. See, the value comes from revenue, real products, real services. Even somebody like Warren Buffett, if he used our platform and thought, man, like this is better to order food from here and know what I'm putting in my body than going to Dairy Queen. If he used one of our platforms and said, hey, this is a better meeting platform than Zoom. I like this better. I'm going to use this instead. He could see value in that. Not because of speculation, because the real product, the real service is just better. You can position yourself in that flywheel. You need to connect with the people that invited you into our ecosystem and tell them you want to become a part of this community. If you're excited about what we're doing, type community in the chat. I'm so excited for each and every one of you that are here today. At the end of the day, every one of us is going to have an opportunity where we can make decisions that will affect our futures, our children's futures, our dreams, our goals, our aspirations. Don't be like so many other people around the world and run away from the opportunity to do something truly great with your lives. Make a decision, make it with confidence, make the right one. Position yourself in this community so you can take advantage of the biggest shift in wealth in human history. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll bring up Jim Bunch.
Let's give him a huge hand. Huge hand, everybody. Tony Swantek laying it down. Fire. I was watching the comments over here. If you are not inspired here, let's get a heart monitor on you and check your pulse, right? I've learned so much from Tony in a short amount of time. I think some of you know I've had some incredible business partners and mentors, from Tony Robbins to Bob Proctor to John Ashraf to Jack Canfield, and many other business partners. But Tony Swantek sees the world differently. And when he communicates like that, I think he brings the game up for all of us. So let's give Tony another incredible, incredible round of applause. Awesome job, brother. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule and your businesses to come educate people on the blockchain. One of the things he said at the end I thought was incredible. He was talking about the impact this can have on families. And I think this is probably one of the most important things. I've never seen in my 56 years on this planet, I have never seen so many families looking for hope, looking for support, looking for connection, feeling a divisiveness, a separatism. I've never seen this. And just like when Scott Loma was talking about the challenges, that we are the problem, we are also the solution. I feel the same way about this. And I want to have production run a quick little video of an amazing individual by the name of Emily Swalberg. Emily has been heading up our customer support. If you've ever sent in a ticket, it's likely that Emily and the team has been the ones managing that. But she was just like me and everybody else. She was a community member. And because she saw the vision and took a little bit of a step forward,